biographies evaluate the life and legacy of Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, author and historian. Vikram Sampath's two-volume biography, Savarkar, echoes from a forgotten past, and Savarkar, a contested legacy, maps Savarkar's journey from a fiery revolutionary to a social worker against the world-shaping events culminating in the independence and partition of India. Journalist, political analyst, and writer Uday Mahurkar's Veer Savarkar, the man who could have prevented partition, co-authored with Chirayu Pandit, examines Savarkar's role as a pioneer of India's national security system and the evolving nature of his ideology. We have today Uday Mahurkar and Makarand Paranjape in conversation with Mandira. Vikram Sampath has had to drop out because of a compelling family reason, and we do regret that he is not being able to join the discussion. But I do think that we have a very, very vibrant panel nevertheless. Makarand is a prolific writer, critic, and scholar. His latest work, JNU Nationalism and India's Uncivil War, is both a personal account and incisive study of the history of our times, India's ongoing transformation, and the meaning of nationalism, what it means to be Indian today. Journalist, political analyst, and writer Uday Mahurkar's Veer Savarkar, the man who could have prevented partition, as we said, is co-authored by Uday Chirayu. Uday is an author, historian, and a former senior deputy editor of India Today magazine, who has penned 2 books on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his governance. His third book, Veer Savarkar, the man who could have prevented partition, with a foreword by RSS Sangh Chalak Mohan Bhagwat, was launched recently. He is currently a Central Information Commissioner with the Government of India. Please also welcome Mandira Nayar. Mandira has been a journalist for 2 decades. She currently works with the Week magazine, writing on books, history, culture, and foreign affairs. She has worked with the Hindu and the Telegraph, and is a Charles Wallace scholar.
Hi. Good morning. I would like to welcome everybody today into what is going to be a very interesting conversation, I hope. And I think it's also really relevant at a point of time to talk about Savarkar at a point, where he is a very polarizing figure. He is the father of Hindutva. And at a point of time when also the Uttar Pradesh elections have shown that Hindutva certainly works. So before we really get into the idea of Hindutva, which I know everybody's really waiting for in this whole debate, but I would really like to talk to Udayji about his book. And he is sort of looking at Savarkar not from the Hindutva angle, which of course he does in his book, but he's also looking at Savarkar as the father of the Indian security state. Sort of looking at it in that aspect. And I would like to begin with him and ask him to talk about how he sees Savarkar as the father of the security state.
I think first I'll talk about the book, as to what the book is about.
Exactly.
This book totally demystifies Savarkar. And it focuses on 2 things about Savarkar, which very few people have seen in the past. One, he was the first person to see that Pakistan is coming in 1937, 10 years before partition happened. And 2, his vision for India's security and diplomacy makes him, we have proved in his book, that he is the father of India's national security. And it also goes into the fact that how India has suffered by keeping away from Savarkar's vision. third thing which it analyzes is Savarkar's Hindutva. All along, Hindutva has been sold, seen as by a section of people as a polarizing idea, which is not the fact. I have tried to prove that Savarkar's Hindutva is an inclusive idea, but it doesn't tolerate appeasement of anybody, not just Muslims. So, I mean, for example, Savarkar came onto the political scene in 1937, December. He had a choice. He had an invitation from Subhash Chandra Bose, Congress leaders who belong to the socialist bloc, Achyutrao Patwardhan, S.M. Joshi. They wanted Savarkar to join Congress because Savarkar was otherwise a very progressive person, you know, on the whole. But Savarkar said no. And his reply was that the Congress has moved so far ahead on the path of minority or Muslim appeasement that it is difficult for Congress to retrace its steps. And to indulge in Muslim appeasement today is betrayal of the nation. And therefore, he said, I would like to stand in the last row of patriots, than the first row of people who are betraying the nation in the name of nationalism. And he had reasons to believe so and to think like that. You see, the Congress game of minority appeasement started in 1916 with the Lucknow Pact. Then came Khilafat, which was much more pronounced than the appeasement in Lucknow Pact. So Savarkar had this history behind him. So when in 1930, Sir Muhammad Iqbal, whose poetries we recite with great interest, you know, he was the one who saw that Pakistan is coming. In the 1930 Allahabad session, Prayagraj session, he was the one who said that I see a future homeland for Indian Muslims in today's Sindh, Punjab, Northwest Frontier Province and Balochistan. Then in 1932, there was a guy called Rahmat Ali Chaudhry who was studying in Oxford. He coined the word Pakistan for this future homeland of Indian Muslims. And it was Jinnah who took the idea ahead. And in 1936, Sindh was detached from Mumbai province by the Britishers. Savarkar called it a Muslim Anglo conspiracy to balkanize India. And therefore, in 1937, he had his entire scenario before him. And that's why he was warning this country about a possible partition of this country in future. When it comes to national security, you see all the problems which India has faced on the national security front in the last 70 years. Savarkar had predicted those problems about 60 to 80 years ago, whether it was Assam, whether it was China, of course, Pakistan. He had internal problems of India in terms of security, you know, all these things he had predicted about 60 to 70 years ago. Therefore, this book, Savarkar, so far was known only as a revolutionary. This book demystifies Savarkar and shows his contribution to the nation in terms of his efforts to prevent partition, in terms of his vision, which he tried to give to the country, of course, quite unsuccessfully. Therefore, this book is quite different from the past books on Savarkar.
Okay, so Udayji is of course started on the Hindutva theory and talking about the separatist thing, but I mean, I would also like to bring in Dr. Paranjape at this moment, because, you know, he talks about, of course, you've talked about Savarkar. Before we talk about Savarkar and Hindutva and go into great detail about this, I would like to bring you in about, in some ways, what we're really debating in some, the idea of the afterlife of Savarkar, whether it is of the security analyst or of the security state, and you lead with the afterlife of Mahatma Gandhi. And in these two afterlives of Gandhi and Savarkar, you know, India's having to kind of choose between that. So I would like to talk to you about in Savarkar's Hindutva India, where does Gandhi fit in? And in the ideological opposite of him, even if in Parliament, when you talk about the portrait, he's ideologically opposite Gandhi. It's in some ways, you know, much more than just the visual thing. So I wanted to talk to you about Gandhi, and how do you think Gandhi fits into this whole world?
Thank you, Mandira. Thank you, Uday. Well, I must say this session is on Savarkar and not on Gandhiji. So Gandhiji can only be used as a point of departure. And I can only say that Gandhiji had differences of opinion with everyone across the political spectrum, including Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Savarkar, Ambedkar, and he was in vigorous debates with all of them. So I just wanted to say, when you talk about superheroes, there's the DC model and the Marvel model. DC model, Superman, Batman, so one hero, one narrative, monologic in a way. The Marvel universe is a constellation of heroes. I think the independence struggle was a constellation of heroes. What unfortunately was done for the last 40, 50, 70 years is one narrative was pushed. So we are suddenly enjoying a Savarkar revival or Savarkar season.
Yeah.
And I welcome it, at least in the English language. Dhananjay Keer's book came out in 65.
Yeah.
So almost, so many years later, 50, 60 years later, you have a slew of books on Savarkar. Vaibhav Purandare, 2 volumes by my friend Vikram Sampath, fantastic books. Yeah. We send our condolences to Vikram.
Yes.
And he's under attack now. We don't want to get derailed, but 6 citation inadequacies in over 1,500 pages of research, and you want to delegitimate him? No, that's not how it's done. So here's the point I want to make. We need many heroes, many narratives, and I do not think that the afterlife of Savarkar is at the expense of the afterlife of Gandhiji. Gandhiji persists. I just did a talk on Gandhi in the pandemic. And, he wrote 2 books, Guide to Health and Key to Health. And if you follow those, your immunity will be stronger. I can guarantee you that. Read those books. So Gandhi was much more than just a political figure. But I just want to come back to Savarkar, please. You see, the important thing, you started by saying Savarkar is a polarizing figure. I disagree. He can be a uniting figure.
But
we see Hindutva today is a big tent. They are winning elections.
True.
So why do you start by calling him a polarizing figure? 1 minute, let me just finish. Why are you trying to shut me up?
No, I'm not trying to shut you up
Let me finish my point. You didn't interrupt him.
Of course, I'm not trying to shut you up at all. I'm just
I start talking and they try to shut me up. I don't know why.
But Dr. Paranjape, I have not tried to shut you up at all. I'm just trying to say, and you started talking about the superheroes. I started saying, and I think it is also important to have a certain, if you're talking about demystifying, then there is a certain myth that you need to demystify. And that is what Uday Bhai talked about, right? He talked about demystifying and he said there is a need. So if there is a need to demystify, then obviously there is a myth that you need to demystify, right? And the reason we brought in Gandhi, because if I quote what you have said at some point of time, you talk about Gandhi and you talk about canceling Gandhi. You talk about a point of time, and I think Vikram's debate is a completely different debate, and you touched upon that. I think it's important to say that his book is a very scholarly book. I don't think anybody's debated that. I also think it's important to realize that there are a lot of scholars who are perceived, and that is my word of it, I'm not saying this thing, who were left of center and perceived as left of center, have also not chosen to sign on to that petition. So I think that, let's not get derailed with the left and the right. I think you said that it is a large tent and everybody has a season. And I think it's important to talk about that season. And it's important to talk about this. When I started saying that he was a polarizing figure, it is because if you look at it, this big, he has a speech in his Hindutva, who's a Hindu, in 1923 and 1928. And I'm quoting from your work, you say that it is important to embrace pluralism of Savarkar. And you've written this in a print article. So there is a need to go beyond that. And there is a tent that you're saying that there is a space for everyone. Udayji and I would...
Let me intervene here.
Can I finish my point though?
Please go ahead and finish your point. Yes.
See, my point is, if you present Gandhi in a certain way, he's a polarizing figure. See, the Dalits don't like him. The women don't like him. A large section of the Muslims don't like him. Some large section of Hindus call him Mullah Mahatma. Anybody can be a polarizing figure. if you present that person in a certain way, and the same figure can be a uniting figure. And you can't cancel Gandhi because you can bring down the statues, you can take his figure from the notes, as Munna Bhai says, notes se hatao, putle girao. But Gandhi represents ek vichar hai, and he's an ecological Gandhi. He will create a chemical locha in your brain. And I'll tell you one thing. See, this is what I want to say. In this country, you can't have thought phobia. Okay, so the moment I start talking about Savarkar, someone will want to cancel me. This is the height of intolerance. Okay, you want to cancel people. Yeah, why should we? 1 minute. No, why are they signing a petition? They want to bring down all the so-called right wing. They tried to bring me down. I stood up against Kanhaiya Kumar. People attacked me. I went to Carleton University. Professor Harsh Daheja is there. A bunch of people came and cancelled my talk there. So I'm just saying we are living in a very hostile world.
Exactly, which is why it's important
I want to add
talk
something
about
here.
this.
So let me just finish. I just
where
want
we are not cancelling each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So once
I want to add something here.
Yes,
I just want to finish my point.
Of course.
You don't let me finish my point.
Savarkar is
He's not letting you finish your point.
Savarkar is the.
Nobody's voting. Of course, let Udayji, can we let him finish his point? Otherwise, he's going to hold this against me and say that I'm cancelling him, which is not true. Okay. So, please.
Now you see.
Of course, please go ahead and make a point.
I agree with Dr. Paranjape to a great extent that Savarkar has been made into a polarizing figure based on some of his
when you mean by made?
For example, the speech which is often quoted, cited to paint him as a polarizing figure. There are two nations within India, one Hindu and one Muslim. This is 1937 December speech when he took over as Hindu Mahasabha president. Now, that entire speech is not quoted. In the same speech, he says that this is a disease. Howsoever unpleasant it might be, we have to cure it. And then he says, in the end, he says, our ideal is a Indian state rising above religion and caste and regional considerations. So basically, if you look at the entire speech, then today's Indian state is basically Savarkar's idea. Today's Indian state,
But it's also
our chapter in the book, Savarkar's vision for free India, says that there are many things in Indian state. And should we talk about Hindutva?
No, we should let Paranjape Saab. Yes, let's Paranjape Saab finishes his point, and then we'll come back to Hindutva. And I have a point about this thing. So please
I want to make my position clear. I'm not here to defend Gandhi or defend Savarkar or oppose Gandhi or oppose Savarkar or pit Gandhi against Savarkar. I'm interested in the truth. It's called Anvikshiki in India. I'm on the side of truth. Now, how do you find the truth? You can only find the truth if you dig deeply, if you read deeply, if you don't quote out of context, if you don't slant the narrative, if you don't massage, if you don't put a spin, if you don't cancel each other. I'm for civil engagement, civil dissent, dialogue. And that is not easy in India because you get polarized, you get reduced. So my humble suggestion, in these matters is let's go to the text. Don't quote out of context. Don't pit one against the other and go deeply. And if you see India as a constellation of heroes and heroines also, her story hasn't been properly told.
True.
Whom do you have? You have Sarojini Naidu, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur.
You have Hansa Mehta.
Hansa Mehta. But what about Kasturba? What about Annie Besant? Okay. So I'm just saying, I'm only making a point. Let's not make it either a Savarkar versus Gandhi debate or Savarkar, the good or the bad and the ugly. No, let's go deeply. And the only thing I wanted to say is we have two aspects of this panel. One is life and one is legacy. I think Udayji's book stands for the legacy. In other words, his book is unique, his and the Chirayuji's, because it's an application of Savarkar's ideas to the present time. So what they're doing is Savarkar as an ideologue has things to offer to India, especially in terms of how we see our security. We are surrounded by hostile neighbors. There are two nuclear powers on our borders. We can't just say, oh, we are peace-loving, Satyameva Jayate, and keep quiet, tie our hands at the back. No, they're going to come through the Khyber Pass one more time. If you don't protect your borders, let me tell you, Kashmir was almost lost almost gone, okay? So let's not be naive.
1 second,
let's not be naive. So 1 minute. So let me finish my point. My point is, there are two aspects to Savarkar in this panel, life and legacy. As to the life, Vikram is not here, but there are many things we now know about Savarkar's life, which we didn't know, at least the English-speaking audience didn't know. So let's read these books. Let's engage with his very complex life, okay? And all the different things he did. And as to the legacy, I think this is the first attempt. Let me congratulate you on this book. I've read it from page to page.
Thank you.
And I got another copy yesterday just so that he could sign it for me. So it's a very interesting book. He tells you how Savarkar's ideas can be applied today. And one more thing, when you want to talk about Savarkar, you never see him, you never show him as an anti-caste guy. You never see him as a guy who said, yes, beef is not sacred, cows are not sacred. You don't show him like that. You always show him as a Hindutvavadi, as a polarizing guy. That's not fair.
Can I
show him in his totality.
One second. Can I just back the truck up here a bit? And I'm saying, when you say you, and this is exactly what we are saying, canceling out, I think, no, okay.
You should take it personally. He's referring to the left.
Thank you so much.
Not you.
But I am actually also positioned on the left. So that is also true, okay? But I'm trying to have a conversation with that, whether my leanings...
I'm the mediating
centrist. You're the mediating centrist. I'm the left liberal heart, a bleeding heart liberal who's now considered anti-national. But I wanted to talk to you about, you talk about legacy.
No, not anti-national. Nobody's anti-national. Okay,
I mean, I think it's all about...
Everyone has a right
to have debate.
Our country,
of course.
To say what they want and to debate and to back up what they say, to provide evidence.
True.
So this Mughal tent, okay, is not for trolls, okay? And we can't say cancel the Mughals.
Nor should we. We shouldn't say cancel the Mughals or anybody else. I think it's also important, and I think what you have brought out in this large thing about life and legacy, and I think you touched upon this, and I know that I'm diverting with this and then talking about Hindutva, is the fact that there was a certain superhero cult where you chose one over the other, where you said the Marvel and the D version, and I agree with that. And I think that there is an important aspect of that where you have everything and I wanted to talk to Udayji about this. When you go to Udayji's office, you find that there's a whole pantheon of heroes, right? And you've got everybody there. So how are you going to, including Gandhi, and you should have Gandhi, okay? I think when you say Paranjape, where the women hate him, I think it's also important to realize that it was Gandhi who brought women out into the public sphere. And we can't take that away from him. But I think women have been battling patriarchy, and Gandhi is a patriarchal figure. So I think that is something that we have to, everybody was. If you look in this whole aspect of men, it is a story of men, right? But I wanted to talk to you about bringing everybody under this tent in Hindutva. And Udayji and you and I have been having this conversation where you talk about this aspect of, and I think in your book, at the end, you talk about the fact that there are sections of this that can be, if it's being misquoted in one way, it is also being misquoted in a world of social media, in a world of cancel culture. Can you talk about aspects of the Hindutva vision of Savarkar being taken over by aggressive militant groups, Hindu militant groups, and you think it's important to rescue that? So can we talk about that?
Let us talk about Hindutva first.
Yes.
Then I'll answer your question also. You see, Hindutva all along has been rather sold as a very polarizing idea. Now, our book starts with 2 chapters which have nothing to do with Hindutva. The first chapter is about the role of illegal Muslim movement in spreading pan-Islamism in the country. And another chapter is about the Congress's Muslim appeasement policies which it pursued before independence. And then the third chapter is understanding Savarkar's Hindutva. So, unless you understand the impact of minority appeasement, the impact of the rise of pan-Islamism, you can't understand Hindutva.
But
now, what I say is that Hindutva is not something which is demanding special rights for the Hindus. It is for equality. Savarkar, let me begin with 3 examples. Let us talk about Savarkar's. First, we talk about Savarkar's visit to Lahore. In 1938, he went to Lahore, and reporters there asked him why you and Jinnah are bent upon dividing the country along religious lines. Savarkar said, "Your question itself is wrong. Me and Jinnah are not feathers of the same bird. Jinnah is for more and more concession for Muslims. I am for equal treatment for all." In 1939, when a set of Shia Muslims in Lucknow passed a resolution which said two things. One, that any Muslim slaughtering a cow will be considered an enemy of the Hindu-Muslim unity. And the second part of the resolution was that Muslims will not object to processions of Hindus being taken from near the mosques. Savarkar read this statement in newspapers at that time and issued a statement welcoming this action on the part of the Shia Muslims of Lucknow. And he wrote to them a personal letter to the Shia Muslim. He said, "I welcome your idea and your thought, and let me assure you, we will try to tell the Hindus not to bring out deliberately processions from near the mosques. Yours is a genuine effort." So he was for genuine Hindu-Muslim unity based on equal rights. What was happening was that Congress's idea, or even Gandhiji's idea for that matter, it was Hindu-Muslim unity at Hindu cost. That is the problem. So our book goes into what Gandhiji said. And so we applaud Gandhi on his economic policies, on his ideas like trusteeship, Guran Swaraj. But we say, if you read the book carefully, you'll find that Gandhi, he becomes a disaster when it comes to national security because of his overemphasis on complete non-violence, because of his overemphasis on Hindu-Muslim unity at any cost, which becomes Hindu-Muslim unity at Hindu cost. So, Hindutva. And third thing, Savarkar's Hindu manifesto. Savarkar's Hindu manifesto, everybody should read it. It says that in independent India, all religions, all castes will have equal rights. Then he goes a step further and says, should anybody try to hinder the puja archana of Muslims or Christians, the state will step in and protect them. But at the third point, he warns, but the nation will not allow creation of a nation within a nation in the name of religious minoritism, which is the story of this country in the first 60 years.
Okay, so now
within 10 years of India's partition, in 1957, Jawaharlal Nehru forged an alliance with the Muslim League in Kerala against the communists.
But
now this alliance was with those very people who had caused India's partition. And thereafter you look at Article 30. Article 30, if there is a minority school, if there is a Muslim running a school, he can keep a Maulvi to teach Quran. If there is a Hindu running a school, he can't keep a Pandit to teach Gita.
But
you see?
So 1 second, I think we're digressing from the aspect of what a conversation is really about. But I wanted to talk to you about when you say that, Nehru makes this thing with the Muslim League. Savarkar holds government with the Muslim League when the Congress walks out. So I think politics, this was earlier. This was in pre-independence.
Let me clarify this. Let me clarify. This is very important.
No, I know, but
because that time also Savarkar had to issue statements to clarify his position. When Hindu Mahasabha joined Fazlul Haq's Krishak party in Bengal and Muslim League in Sindh, he had issued a clear-cut statement. He has said that when everything is lost, when Hindu protection is not possible, that time you should, as a strategical move, join those very people and save whatever interest you can of the Hindus. So, in a polity where pan-Islamism was rising.
Okay, so now can I say in some ways ideology and politics, and we've seen this in terms of the UP election too.
Same thing BJP did in Kashmir.
So
when I asked a leader or senior leader of the BJP, look here, you were talking about removing 370 and here you joined hand with Mehbooba Mufti. He told me, no, it is a strategical move. Unless we go into the government, how will we know how to go about?
So politics.
Their government has always been of people who are protecting Muslim interest.
I want to get Professor Paranjape in here, but 1 second. I want to make this point about politics and ideology, and I think this is an important point to make. That you can have a different ideology, but in political this thing you do have to compromise to make your own stand. So I don't think it's
compromises are made for meeting ideological targets.
But I think
compromises are
Udayji,
made to meet ideological targets on the long run.
But Udayji, we've already defeated the Congress. We've finished UP elections. Let's not do this. Let's not talk about the Congress. Let's talk about the Hindutva. And I wanted to bring you in one aspect, and I want to bring in Professor Paranjape in this. Yes. I want you. Can I ask you the question, and can you weigh in this? Okay. So my question really is that I think Udayji talks about the second part of the piece, and he says that it is a quality for all. But, and I want you to bring in this, and then you can weigh in with my question. And I'm not canceling you out. I'm allowing myself to have a conversation. I'm saying, when you label the other, when we say this about Jinhan, when you say that they're two separate nations, you've already labeled somebody as the other. And then how do you fit this into a pluralistic big tent? And then please go in. So, once you've already said somebody is the other, then they've already seen as...
I got your question.
Yeah.
Look, there's a very simple answer. Treat everybody the same way, which we do not. In India, I'm in higher education. All my life, all I've done is read, write, think, teach. Every seat in India has a quota. Everything is quota. Nobody's treated equally. Everybody has a tag. We have created social divisiveness to such a degree that if you go to the state of Maharashtra, where I'm, supposed to come from, Sindhis, Gujaratis, all kinds of people have minority status, linguistic minority, this minority, that minority, because they don't let you breathe in this country. So treat everybody the same. If you want secularism, go to Singapore, see the model. Everyone is treated the same. Here, we do not treat people the same. But I want to weigh in on Hindutva. Look, the important thing for all of us to remember is these are not static figures, okay? Look at Savarkar. In 1909, he writes the First War of Independence. He's sitting in the British Library. The book is smuggled in 1910, the same year that Hind Swaraj is written under Pickwick papers. He talks about Hindu-Muslim unity there, in that. What happened in between? In 1923, Khilafat. So what I want to tell you, please listen, there were two...
also jail. He was also in cellular jail.
Of course. In jail, they were converting Hindus. The Muslim prisoners were converting in the Andamans. But Hindu people were getting sodomized in those jails. Please read. I don't want to go into the unsavory, but let me make a point. Please don't interrupt me.
Can I just make a point about
Mandira,
jails?
No, let me finish my point.
Finish this and then I want to make a point. Okay.
No interruption.
Please.
Okay, we had two dress rehearsals for partition. One was the partition of Bengal. The other one was the Khilafat. Savarkar saw what was coming. He said, you walk on this path, you will destroy this country. Look at what happened in Bengal. The Muslim League was born in Dhaka in 1906. The Hindu organizations were born much later, RSS 1925. You had unlocked the genie of communalism. Lord Curzon did it. Bongo Bhango was reversed. Khilafat happened. Savarkar saw through all this. This is how you have to see his hardening of his stance in Hindutva. He said, you walk down this path, you will not only have one India divided into two, you'll have a Nizam state, you'll have some other state, you will have many little states, you will have millats within the larger India. So please, and Gandhi ji, I've written a book on the last days of Gandhi. I have read every single one of his prayer meeting speeches in Delhi. He arrived on 20th of September. It was raining. He came from Kolkata. He doused the communal flames there. He fasted in Delhi. He was murdered. He was assassinated on the 30th of January, 1948. Every day he gave a prayer meeting speech. For a bit, he was stopped. He was cancelled. I read all of them. He went to the mosques in Daryaganj. He told the Muslims, drop your weapons here. He admitted that his non-violence was a failure. When the Marauders and the mercenaries led by Pakistani generals invaded Kashmir, he told Nehru, send the troops. What happened to his non-violence? He said, let violence be restricted to the state, to the police, and to the armed forces. Let's not have marauding and vigilante gangs roaming the streets of Delhi and taking revenge on each other. He accepted his non-violence had failed because humanity had not reached a level, and this is where we bring in Sri Aurobindo. It's his 150th anniversary. He said, you cannot impose non-violence from the top. War will continue until war becomes psychologically impossible. So Gandhi's and Aurobindo's project was bigger. They wanted to transform the human condition itself. Human consciousness has to be changed. But until that is changed, righteous self-defense and other kinds of violence, even Gandhiji endorsed them. The violence, the non-violence of the brave means you can give your life, not take a life. But if you're not there, you have to protect your own. You can't run away. You can't become a coward. And Gandhiji said that the Indian soldiers defending Pathankot, defending Kashmir, that is Srinagar, they are practicing non-violence. I've read every single of his statement. So please, all these figures changed. Let's not lock them and pigeonhole them and say one was violent, one was non-violent. They all evolved. And Hindutva evolved because of the conditions. If everybody had worked for a united India, risen above religious identity, we may not have the need for this. But those circumstances, 2 dress rehearsals and a real partition. And what happened? How many people died? How many people died in the partition? Could we prevent it? Could non-violence prevent that human conflagration? No.
But okay, so my question is, and I agree with you, there has been a huge, sorry, we are finishing off. People would like to open the thing, but 1 second, before we got on, I want to ask an important question. You talk about Gandhi and 48. There is a legacy of Savarkar with Gandhiji's murder, okay, which is a difficult legacy for you, for everybody to claim. And we've had this conversation where you say that the Savarkar, that now that has been a season of Savarkar, there was a season of Savarkar where there wasn't enough. The Savarkar family has talked about how the BJP didn't necessarily bring in. So how do you get beyond that? And
I think before we finish and we open the floor to the audience, we should speak about his national security vision. That part is very important.
I'm sure there will be a question. Let's talk about Gandhiji's.
Let me speak a few things. I think that is very important. Nobody knows about it.
But let's also talk about this.
I'll do it.
2 seconds, and then I will listen. Yeah. I want to ask one more question.
You see, when I say that Savarkar is the father of India's national security, we have produced, me and my author Chirayu Pandit have produced enough evidence for an open-minded person to believe what we are saying. As I told you earlier, that he predicted all the problems which India has faced on the national security front in the last 70 years, about 60 to 80 years ago. Let's start with Assam. In 1941, when intruders were coming from East Bengal and settling down in the Brahmaputra Valley in large numbers, he was the first leader from outside Assam to warn that these intruders will pose a problem for the culture of Assam as well as for the security of northeast frontier of India. And that time Pandit Nehru said, nature abhors vacuum, which means if there is a vacant place, people will come and stay there. How can we prevent them? That time Savarkar in his oar, of course, he had a very harsh way of saying things. He said that nature also abhors poisonous gas. And his prediction came true ultimately today. Then on China in 52, he was the first leader to see that China, which was far behind India militarily and economically in 1948 when it came into being, had raced ahead of India militarily in 1952. He said that he warned the nation as to in which direction we are going. China has overtaken us, and he advised the then government to make India a nuclear state. Had India become a nuclear state in 1952, India would have been a superpower by now. 54, when Jawaharlal Nehru came up with the principle of Panchashil, that time Savarkar said that to talk with China in such weak terms after the way it has swallowed Tibet is inviting China to swallow our land. And after 8 years, when China attacked India, so he could foresee the Indo-China war in 1962, 8 years before. And then what he said? He said the Panchil of Jawaharlal Nehru comprises beads of the rosary. The Panchil of China is bombs, it's missile, it's machine gun. And he said, that time he made 2 statements. He said, on the world arena, military strength is the ultimate decider of a nation's greatness. And nowhere it is proved correct
than in the case of Taliban.
Can I
Today, Taliban, which has pushed back America had to leave Afghanistan
That's also because the Americans
Taliban.
wanted to get out.
Look, let's just say it in one line. Until the world turns non-violent, a demilitarized India would be disastrous.
That's so.
Please, my friends, go to any museum. There is a good museum in Jaipur. Go to any temple outside. Every image is disfigured. Every monument in India has been devastated. You want that again or you don't? It's very simple. You have to protect the borders. You have to protect your civilization. You must have a security vision.
Now, Taliban is not able to oppose China, because China's military strength. Taliban, which has defeated America and Afghanistan, it cannot oppose China, despite China committing atrocities on the Uyghur Muslims just across the border.
Okay,
so that is the importance of military strength for any nation.
Okay, so I don't think the debate is, I think there is a lot to be said about the military vision of India, and I do think that we should have a military. I don't think at some point of time Gandhi also talks about disbanding the army. I think in some ways, and I was hoping that we can talk about this in the session, is that we get stuck in, you said, how do you present? We're also presenting each other in a very sketchbook sort of way. You're looking at Gandhi, you're looking at Nehru, you're looking at, there is this, if you have compassion, this thing, we should also look at Nehru. We should, revisit Nehru at this point of time, where there is, he was a prime minister, he was the first prime minister, he does have a stamp in India. But I wanted to talk to you, and we started off and you said, I think Professor Paranjape said this, where he said that, it isn't about Gandhi, but it is about Savarkar, but you cannot talk about them without each other, because there was the assassination of Gandhi, which Savarkar has to talk about. So can we talk about that? And then, I'm sorry, I want to ask this question before everybody else does, as the only woman here, and then I will open up. I know it's this thing. So can you talk about that? The fact that there was, you talk about it at the end of your book, and I think Professor Paranjape talks about this when he talks about pluralism, right? And the lack of intolerance. I think when you talk about Hindutva, we've already seen how a militant version of Hindutva can get Gandhi assassinated. So how do you look at that, and how do you control that? And how do you bring in pluralism? If you have quick questions.
Gandhi's assassination killed three entities: Gandhi himself, the Hindutva movement, and Savarkar himself. Savarkar's political career was finished by Gandhi's assassination. So let us be very clear about it. Secondly, now there is enough evidence to show that Savarkar was implicated at the behest of some people in the then Nehru government.
I'm not talking about, he has been exonerated. Nobody's talking about the fact that he was exonerated, and he's been exonerated by the thing. So if you have to start, that's not the question. I said, yeah. And can you please weigh in on pluralism?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are always two competing versions of any ideology. The Hinayan and the Mahayan. Okay, the smaller vehicle and the greater vehicle. Though the Hinayanis wouldn't like it, they would like themselves to be called the Theravadins. Even Hindutva has a Hinayan and a Mahayan version. I hope you get my point. You can say there's a soft Hindutva versus the hard Hindutva. There's a plural Hindutva versus the narrow fanatical Hindutva. Let the nation decide which it wants. I believe we are a pluralistic nation. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. Look at the Atharva Veda, look at the Prithvi Sukta. There'll be many languages, many customs, many costumes, many ways of living, many religious ideas. This will never change in India. If you want to debate Hindutva, let's have a plural Hindutva. I always say that. Thank you.
Okay. I think there are lots of questions. Can we bring it in? Yes, the lady. Oh, you have an online question. I'm so sorry. That's what you were trying to say. Okay. Oh.
So this is Garima asks, I appreciate the point that the panel was making to appeal to people not to use Savarkar as a polarizing tool. How can we make sure that happens in terms of people from both sides, the opposer of his ideology as well as the followers of Savarkar?
That's perfect. That's exactly. Essentially, how can you make it, how he ended it, if you said that it isn't a polarizing tool, how do you make it not a polarizing tool? How do you use an opposer? Yes.
And you answered in 5 minutes. I'll answer in 1 second, which is, please read Savarkar. Simple. We have become a nation of people who don't read, but they troll. So read the text, they're all available. Read them, engage with them. Okay? Please do that. Read.
I will go by what Dr. Paranjape is saying, that you have to read Savarkar. For example, I told you the speech which is often quoted to portray him as a polarizing figure. There are two nations within India, one Hindu, one Muslim. The same speech in the end, he says that our ideal is an Indian nation rising above religion, caste, and parochial considerations. So I think that is very clear. And you know, our chapter on Savarkar's vision for free India has many suggestions which were incorporated in the constitution. So what I am saying is that even today's India has elements which are based on Savarkar's ideology to a very great extent. So that shows how far Savarkar has been wrongly portrayed or misportrayed.
Or not. I think it's everybody has a season. I think that there's a lot of misportrayal in everything. I think it's also the fact that we started with cancel culture, and I'm going to say this fast, that you have in this world of social media, you cannot debate nuance. So if you want to read Savarkar and you want to talk about that, then you also have to understand that there is, you know, that everything is portrayed in, if you have cancel or whatever, in black and white, you can't have that. Complex characters. Nehru is a complex character. You know, Savarkar is a complex character. Gandhi is a very complex character, and we have to embrace them all. We can't choose, and this can't be a superhero, and we have to need more women superheroes.
But in the end, you can't have a balancing act. But you have to draw the positive elements from everybody.
True, and everybody
so
should
that is
have
what we have done in this book.
Of course, please read Udayji's book. Please read Vikram Sampath's book. Please go out and buy it. Please read Professor Paranjape's book. Read his book on Gandhi. Read everything, because never believe WhatsApp University. That's my own takeaway from this. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Do we have questions?
No, we can't.
No, we can't have questions. Sorry. Yes,
we don't have
last
time.
question.
We've run out of time.
One for the lady. One for the lady. They don't want to cancel out. Please carry on.
Thank you so much for this enlightening session. And my question into Paranjape sir, it's a very basic question. You know, what's the advice for the generation today, that why we are having this culture or this environment where we are like in Nehru tumhare, Savarkar hamare, Patel tumhare, or Subhash ji hamare. We don't want this discussion. We want to embrace all these leaders, because we should accept or digest the contribution these visionary and charismatic leaders gave to us. So what do you have to say to this
Sab
generation?
hamare, sara jahan hamara, aur hum sare jahan ke. Okay, that is the message of India. All
True.
are ours, and we also belong to all. That is what India
Udayji will
But
have
we
an
have to
objection.
draw the right things from every hero.
Udayji will have a problem
So
with
you
the
can't have a
use of-
balancing act.
No,
ये भी अच्छा है, वो अच्छा
I
नहीं
think
होता.
I think
You
Udayji.
draw things which are applicable today for the nation, which are beneficial to the nation. Then and then you can draw from them. Otherwise, you can go on doing a balancing act.
I think we will all bring in everybody in the book.
We have said in our book that Gandhi's idea of Gram Swaraj, Gandhi's economic policies, his idea of trusteeship, his inclusive social service model are good. But Gandhiji was a disaster in national security. That you have to accept. Then and then you will draw from them.
I wish we had more time, you know, for the discussion. But would like to thank Makarand, Paranjape, Uday Mahurkar, and Mandira Nayar for a fabulous, insightful session. Sakal Media Group was the sponsor of the session, and we'd like to thank Sakal Media Group for their support. Makarand and Uday will be signing their books right here, so grab your copies, and they'll be here right on your left to sign the books. Thank you.